Ah. Wait, didn't I already do this opening skit before? Alright, that's enough sass from you. Okay, yes, if that opening skit is anything to say, I have already done a ranking for this season of Death Battle, but that was with your only mate and Sean, and I kind of want to do one that's just about my opinions on it, my rankings, and you know, because I feel like there were some episodes on our ranking list that were more so requiring more Sean's opinion and your only mates. I couldn't really speak for a lot of them because I know Sean was really hyped for some, mate was, and I wasn't a huge fan of them, or I just felt like that episode was more deserving for them to speak of. So I asked you guys if you would like to hear my own opinions without your only mate and Sean, and see if my opinion may have changed over time or if it's relatively the same. This list will be excluding Ryder vs Excalibur because that was more of a bonus episode, but if you are curious where I'd rank it overall this season, it's on my list between Thor vs Vegeta and Gogeta vs Vegeta, which when I get to those, you'll see, you'll get an idea where I put it on my list. Jason vs Michael Myers. So I do know this is a relatively popular episode with the Death Battle fans, including the horror fans. What did I think about it? Being a Halloween fan, I thought it was average at best. I thought the fighting was a little bit underwhelming, and I will admit I did like the theme that the episode was going for with Wiz and Boomstick, Ringmaster, Jocelyn, and the infamous robot I wish to not even talk about just because I don't like him. And of course I did kind of like the fact that as the analysis was going on, more and more of the side characters were being pulled away or killed, quote unquote. But where the episode kind of falls apart for me is, one, the humour wasn't there, and I also just felt like the fight was trying too hard to be a slasher film over a fight of the two most iconic slasher villains. And of course, one of the complaints I had personally, which I even kind of predicted in my prediction video for this fight. Okay, this is going to be a Halloween episode, Death Battle. Go super brutal on this one. Like, top Omni-Man versus
they're slasher villains!
Exactly, because like, go... I would be so disappointed if it is legit just Jason decapitating Michael Myers, because... And how did the fight end? Jason decapitating Michael, which is just the most average kill you could give these horror icons. I'll give him style points for then using the axe to then chop off their head on the gravestone. But the killing blow was still just a decapitation, so I wasn't really that blown away. And I will admit, this season has had kind of lackluster deaths, so I can kind of say this was a little bit better than some, but just being better than some is not really a big up. It's more so just an underwhelming praise. I guess we can add that to a dictionary. However, for why maybe this episode might be this way might be due to the behind the scenes story I heard on Robustcast. So they brought one of the storyboarders on board. That was something I wrote in my script. So Robustcast brought one of the storyboard writers for their ranking video, and he kind of emphasised that this fight was mostly written to be a live action fight. Now, that's not to say they didn't plan for this to either be sprites or 3D, but I can easily tell just by rewatching it after watching that interview, there was clearly meant to be a live action fight rather than a 3D fight. Of course, why that didn't happen, maybe due to budget, maybe they couldn't schedule on time, so they just stuck to doing a 3D fight. However, I feel like that doesn't really help my complaint for it. It still had shaky cams, it still had an underwhelming death, and overall, compared to the other Halloween themed episodes we've had in this show, this one just feels underwhelming. Which is a shame because I love Michael Myers, so to finally see him on the fight, even if he lost, I just didn't really feel like I was that impressed. It just felt like a pretty underwhelming Halloween episode. James Bond vs John Wick. So what did this British gentleman think about a fight with the most iconic British hero in UK? It's not even any fucking tea in this. I feel cheated. So, when this fight was announced, I was initially excited. I loved the Daniel Craig James Bond films, and I loved the John Wick movies. I feel like if I wasn't, and this fight was my introduction to them, not the greatest to show off their skills. Sure, the analysis might have done them justice, but I also felt like there wasn't really anything that memorable in it, aside Boomstick continuously pressing that pen and you're just guessing when it's going to explode. The fight itself... I don't want to live in this world anymore. Okay, bit of an exaggeration. The fight is fine when it's the end of the fight. What I mean by that is when the car comes in and starts spinning around firing and there's that epic music kicking in. That's only when it starts getting good. But I really feel like that should have been a part when the fight's getting more epic, not just when it starts getting good. You don't want to start eating a meal and you only start enjoying it when you got to the middle part of the meal. And the death itself was pretty underwhelming given the two franchises these two come from. I mean, John Wick has the most creative kills in movies to date, and James Bond is so iconic for its over-the-top villain deaths. Yet, instead we just have a chandelier drop on John Wick, and he just sits there and takes it. That's a bit of an underwhelming way for John Wick to go out. Couldn't it just come down to like the hand-to-hand combat, and then that's when James Bond pulls out the pen, and of course John Wick steals it and tries to stab him, only for James Bond to do a reversal, stab him, and activate the explosive. It's both a blend of the over-top kills in James Bond and of course John Wick. You're combining essentially two things into one, which I feel like a Death and Death Battle should try and do. Something like Bomberman vs Dig Dug did, where Dig Dug first impaled Bomberman with his pump, but then ran away, and Bomberman didn't realise his bomb was activated, and then he exploded. I know, a bit of a weird episode to do a comparison, but that's what I kind of think about when you think about combining like a crossover kill, you know, try and be creative with it and do something like that. Overall though, yeah, it's only just slightly better than Michael Myers vs Jason. And that's only because the last section of the fight is really good. I think the hand-to-hand combat, or at least close combat, was far more interesting than when they were trying to shoot one another. Though I will say, I do think this scene in the opening of the fight is pretty brilliant.
Seems you've got me at a disadvantage. You won't mind giving a dead man walking one last smoke?
No, you won't.
Nothing else to say, that was just pretty awesome. Tundra vs Jonathan Joestar. So Demon Slayer fans, I want you to kind of bear with me on this. I don't really think Tanjiro is that much of an interesting character. Was that a Blake plushie? Okay, to be clear, Tanjiro is not a terrible character. I do think later episodes he does get really good. I think last season he was really terrific. But as far as anime protagonists go, I'm not that invested in his character arc. I think he is your standard, you know, strong-hearted, like, pure of heart protagonist. But in saying that, I do like Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer is a really good show. I actually recommend anyone who hasn't watched it yet to check out on Crunchyroll or buy it on DVD. I mean, do something. It's a really good show. I think it's even available on Netflix. As for Jonathan, I have gotten into Jojo after Alucard vs Dio. He's an alright character, but not really a character I would be sad whether he died or lived. In fact, when he died in the show, I kind of shrugged it off, because it's like, it's not the end of the world, really. Well, I mean, kind of, because Dio was going to conquer the world, but you get my point. So when these two were announced to fight, I was pretty interested in it, and mostly just for the style of the fight, what it could have been. Because if there's one thing Jojo and Demon Slayer have in common, it is just their animations are just gorgeous to look at. It's almost like looking at art come to life. And when the fight came out, it was entertaining. Albeit, I think it is a little cheaply made. Where are all these Blake plushies coming from? Okay, by cheaply made, maybe that's a bit mean. I mostly just mean the fact the sprites didn't really capture the fast-moving pace of both Jojo and Demon Slayer. And the little elemental bits with the fire and the water, they were relatively passable. I do give them credit that they were hand-drawn for this fight, but the thing that made the animes just so much fun to watch was just how artistic they looked at when they were in motion, whereas in the fight itself, they relatively just looked like PNG images just put on screen. And of course, if you watch Lads Discuss Death Battle, you kinda know how I feel about the death.
On my honor as a gentleman, I will protect her with my life.
Look, I am sorry, I know so many people really think this bit is so emotional and just heart-wrenching, but the overacting of Jonathan is just too funny. I'm sorry, and plus the sprite with the cartoony little waterfalls of tears, I'm sorry, that's just funny. They do nail the emotional part in a later episode, but I'm sorry, it was just too funny to watch. Where are those Blake plushies coming from? Overall though, the fight itself wasn't bad. Sean really liked it, and going back to watching it, I do think it's a lot better than my first viewing, but I can't say it safely that I'll go back to rewatch it now and again. Magneto vs Tetsuo. Again, this is a really big fan favourite episode, and even Sean really liked this episode. I will admit, maybe I was a bit too harsh on it when it first came out, but overall, going back to rewatch it, what are my opinions? It's a good episode. But I do think the analysis when discussing Akira feels really underwhelming for such an impactful anime. Like, okay, I know I sound like an Akira fanboy, but when Tetsuo was announced in the year before, I looked up Tetsuo, I watched the movie Akira, and I thought that movie was phenomenal. The animation quality, the story, the characters, just the whole theme of Akira just is brilliant. Tetsuo's a really engaging villain as well. I mean, I feel like because Akira's finally joining Death Battle, you would want to hype it up because this is the most impactful animes of all time. And Death Battle just kind of treats it just as another anime, really. And what I mean by that is because where you've had previous Death Battles where they've hyped up iconic figurines like Naruto, Goku, Superman, and even Batman, why does Akira and even Tetsuo not get that kind of level of hype? I mean, if it wasn't for Akira, we probably wouldn't even have Dragon Ball in the UK, or maybe we wouldn't even have Dragon Ball in general. Am I overhyping it? Maybe a little bit, but I did just feel like this episode needed a bit more hype around it when it comes to the analysis. Even when I went back to watch the Death Battle cast, it really didn't feel like they were that hyped to do this episode. It really just felt like they were happy about it, but not really, oh my god, we're finally doing Akira, yeah! You know, not that type of hype. Magneto's analysis was really good. It really sold what type of character he is. He's an anti-hero, maybe even an anti-villain to be more correct. However, he goes for a really good redemption arc, and even in the fight itself, it's really stylized. And I really liked how they captured both these characters, showing Tetsuo's psycho side, but also showing Magneto's, you know, villainous side. But then when it came to Tetsuo calling for help because he's suffering, Magneto went into his hero mode. And I do think, unlike Tundra vs Joestar, I actually do feel like they actually nailed the emotional moment. Just a little softer tune playing as Tetsuo was dying, and he said thank you, and Magneto just taking a deep breath and saying you're welcome.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
And that to me is pretty heartwarming, yet also really tugging on your feelings. Especially if you know the movie Akira, you'll know why that's very emotional. And it really captured how much of a good character Magneto is. But unfortunately, I just didn't feel too much hype was around this episode, and even in the analysis, they didn't really offer that much, well, hype for it. I know, it seems like a weird complaint, but this is just how I felt when I was listening to the analysis. I do feel like the analysis and how they talk about characters is just as important as the fight. If we were to just base like our ranking on the fight itself, then I would say this episode might be in the top 7, but of course the analysis just wears it down for me. I'm reviewing the whole episode, I'm afraid. Dwayne Johnson versus Black Adam versus Apocalypse. So when this episode was coming out after hype for the Black Adam movie, yeah, so despite the fact this episode was coming out during the hype of the Black Adam film, which funny enough I think more people went to see Black Adam vs Apocalypse over the actual movie, I gotta say, I don't really think this is my favourite Marvel vs DC fight. Yeah, if you're a Black Adam fan, you are not going to enjoy this episode. Not because the fight was bad, no, the fight and the death were brilliant. And yeah, Black Adam lost, but it was still entertaining. Unfortunately, where this episode falls flat for me is because it doesn't feel like they were feeling the love for this episode. It really does feel like they only done this fight to promote the movie, and that's it. Now you may be thinking, but Bill, they've done episodes where they've promoted like movies or TV shows, why is this one any different? Well, it's how you feel they're presenting it. And just like my problem with Tetsuo versus Magneto, you can clearly tell they just wanted to get through this episode. The analysis for both Apocalypse and Black Adam feels really rushed. It feels as though they just wanted to get all their stuff out and just get on with the fight just so they can move on to episodes they wanted to do this season. And yes, with Rooster Teeth / Death Battle being owned by Warner Bros, I wouldn't be surprised if this really just was Warner Bros trying to encourage them to focus on Black Adam, just so they can, you know, get more people to view it. I mean, hell, the actual Death Battle cast was promoting the movie, so there's clearly something going on where they just wanted to get the payment for this, move on to episodes they actually had a passion for. I mean, for crying out loud, look. They got Dwayne's Black Adam in the thumbnail. Like, that pretty much sells it that they were legit just doing this to promote the movie. And unfortunately, that's how I kind of felt watching the analysis. The analysis really just felt like they wanted to get through the analysis as quick as they can. Thankfully though, the fight itself doesn't have that same baggage. You can tell the animators were working really hard to show off how powerful these two were. The actors were brilliant, and that soundtrack. Still very pissed off at Demon for leaking that online, but he's suffering from a few snake bites, so all's forgiven. So yeah, analysis wise, doesn't feel as interesting, there's not even that many memorable jokes. It's clearly they just wanted to get through this as quick as they can, but thankfully, the fight was entertaining enough, so I'll give it a pass. Hercules versus Sun Wukong. Also, isn't it kind of funny on my ranking list that both the thumbnails that featured Dwayne The Rock are right next to each other? I don't know why, that wasn't intentional, I just kind of find that humorous, that's how it came out. So I gotta say, when this fight was announced, I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, we've had anime, comic books, movies, advertisements in Death Battle, but never mythologies. Mythologies are probably one of the biggest parts of human history when it comes to fantasy and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of things that we're into these days wouldn't be as important if it wasn't for mythologies. So why not actually do a fight with the most iconic and probably the most famous mythologies out there? Hercules versus Sun Wukong. And I gotta say, the analysis was really entertaining. Not for just the humour parts of it, but just the learning about the crazy things people in mythology thought of gods. Hell, I didn't even know the Milky Way was named after Hercules' mum's boob juice. So yeah, people in Greek times believed that we lived in breast milk in our galaxy. That is why it's called the Milky Way. Sun Wukong was also kind of interesting to learn about because a lot of characters that have actually been inspired by Sun Wukong took aspects of him, but if you want to know what the actual mythology is, Sun Wukong's a dick. But honestly, to me, that's what kind of made watching him fight more entertaining. He's such an entertaining dickhead, to be honest. I feel like characters that are just made to be douchey and annoying can be made to be entertaining characters, and Sun Wukong's just one of those people. And as for the fight itself, pretty good fight overall. I like the style of it, and I also like the fact that it was in a narration and like a methodical style, with it being on the scroll and stuff like that. Little detail when like Sun Wukong gets like knocked out of the scroll, he's legit out of the scroll during the fight. But of course, if you've watched Lads Discuss Death Battle, what did we think about the death, aka the finale of the fight? Well, Yeah, I think it's very clear that this death is without a doubt the worst death this season. I don't know, that's saying a lot. It really is just two of the gods clashing with a punch and a staff, and Hercules just gets erased into nothingness, and then that's how it ends. Bit underwhelming. I like the little detail that they're celestial bodies outside of the scroll. You can actually see when they're clashing. Before, like, you see what happens to Hercules' physical body, you see the celestial one impaled by, like, the staff. But on your first viewing, you might have not seen that, so that's kind of underwhelming. In fact, it's kind of sad that the celestial part of Hercules had a more brutal death than Hercules himself. It really was just him being turned into ash, but not even in a gruesome way. Heck, even Son Wukong kind of made fun of it, just going, "Wow, I hit him so hard I reduced him to nothingness." Because that's something you apparently did he? If someone could let me know in the comments when he done that. If that's the case, then I'll forgive it more, because if that's how he's killed his villains in the past. However, if this really was just their only way on killing Hercules, bit of an underwhelming way for him to go. I mean, hell, God of War 3 had a much more brutal and savage death for him. I don't know, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Am I too harsh on this episode? That again, I'm pretty sure you're going to think I'm harsh on a lot of episodes. But you know what? Let's get into the top 10 now. These are the episodes that I think really start to peak for this season. Scarlet Witch versus Zatanna. Let me tell you something, this episode got way more better, especially after watching Multiverse of Madness. Scarlet Witch in the comics, I've not really read a lot of comic books that feature her, but overall I can't say I'm a fan of her character. I think she's even kind of lame as a villain. Zatanna, on the other hand, again, haven't read too many comic books of her in them. I've seen the animated films and even the animated shows where she's featured in. She's a likeable character, but I do think the fight actually made her more entertaining than what the shows and movies have made me feel for her. Analysis-wise, it was pretty much just standard, like, this is what they did, blah blah blah. But overall, there wasn't too much humour in the analysis. The fight itself, on the other hand, was perhaps one of my favourites when it came to Marvel vs DC. So creative featuring these two characters. If there was something that was missing from Doctor Strange vs Doctor Fate, was the creativity when it came to using their spells. After all, they're reality warpers, so you would think maybe they should spend more time trying to show off their reality warping powers and being a bit creative. Well, it wasn't really, it was just badass, but that was still good. This fight was just creative. Setting the stage where Zatanna's performing, and they're just trying to one-up one another. Undoubtedly the most iconic moment was when Scarlet Witch makes fun of her.
You know the difference between you and I. Power!
And then Zatanna just replies back with,
"Well, I think the difference is presentation!"
You can just tell the actresses for this fight were having a blast. Especially Zatanna's actress, and she had so many snarky moments replying to Scarlet Witch. And my god, Zatanna juggling the universes and throwing them at Scarlet Witch's head up to the point her eyes started twitching when the third one was thrown to her. Comedy gold. I mean, come on, things being thrown at someone's head will always be funny. That's if you can hit me. I might need therapy. The death itself, I also think was very creative. Like, okay, yeah, as far as brutality, not really that brutal. In fact, they kind of cut away from the killing blow, which is a bit underwhelming. But I can't lie, Scarlet Witch being stuffed in a box after Zatanna uses the No More Witches, something that Scarlet Witch has used for mutants in the comic books. It's kind of like an ironic justice in a way. And I can't lie, the disrespect of Zatanna just displaying her sawn off body on stage and people just cheering. Yeah, I can't lie, that's very, that's dark. But given all the suffering Scarlet Witch has caused on people, I think this is kind of a justifiable thing to do to this type of character. Deku versus Astor. Also, sorry if the lighting suddenly changed. It was getting dark and I needed to turn on the light, so I couldn't see myself on screen. I was generally quite surprised at how controversial this episode has become. So what's the controversy around this death battle? Well, for one, people feel as though Astor should have just killed Deku immediately in the fight. You people have watched anime fights, right? You don't just have the character just overwhelm one of the other characters just for the sake of it being realistic. Hell, the only point we watch anime is to escape realism. The other side of the controversy was the fact that this wasn't a highly requested Deku matchup. But I'll be honest, I haven't really heard much about Astor aside watching Black Clover Season 1. And overall, I just couldn't really think of a character that would be a good fit for him. Dang, and that's probably because I'm not really a Black Clover fan, so maybe if I watch more of it, then I could come up with a matchup. Obviously, Deku has had quite a few protagonists suggested to him. One was Mob Psycho, and the other was Miles Morales, which personally, I actually think that would have been a much more fitting fight for the Deku. Evidently though, Death Battle disagreed. However, does that really ruin the episode for me? Not really. I've had so many death battles where I didn't get the opponent I wanted them to fight. I've wanted Bowser to fight Eggman, but instead we got Ganondorf. I wanted Yang to fight Leone, and I wanted Beerus to fight Giratina from Pokemon. Evidently though, sometimes you just don't get that episode. But I don't think that ruined this episode for me, because I actually think the episode on its own was pretty good. Pretty good. Analysis was pretty hilarious. I love the fact they gave both Deku and Astor the much respect that I feel like most of the anime community doesn't really give anymore. I'm not sure what's happened all of a sudden. Deku went from being one of the most liked anime protagonists to either just seen as mid or just bad, which I really don't get, because I always thought Deku was a pretty good character. I don't know, maybe it could be where the My Hero Academia hype's kind of died down, especially with its finale coming soon. I guess maybe that's why. I don't know, it's a me thing. I don't really see what's wrong with Deku. As for the fight itself, it was pretty good. The soundtrack for it was good. I loved the environment they were fighting in. I even felt like the humor in the fight as well was also pretty good. Astor freaking out that he couldn't cut through Deku's abilities because they're not magic was pretty on character, because yeah, he's from a universe where people use magic, so to fight someone where his only weapon that was made to hurt people of magic doesn't hurt them, you're gonna be surprised by that. It'd be like in real life, you're someone who uses a knife in a fight. Hey, I live in London, people have knives all the time, and you just stabbing them and nothing happens. You would naturally freak out about that. The death itself, now your anime did kind of go into more details about the death, because at first glance, I thought it was kind of meh. I mean, in terms of the other deaths, it was pretty good. But I don't know, I just still felt like it was just a good death. Upon saying that though, a really dark fact that your early mate told us, when Deku used his Plus Ultra, he died. You see his eyes go completely white, because in the anime, it's confirmed if he uses Plus Ultra, as of now, he would die. So when he used it in the fight, that's him dying. That is dark, but I also kind of like it. But again then, I feel like the build up to the death was also kind of not surprising. Deku knocks Astor to the floor, and he's in the air, he says, "I did it." Astor gets up, and then you immediately know he's going to have the swords fall down on him. I think with a little bit of editing, it could have actually been made a bit better, because it could have thrown you off on who you thought won. Just something like this. I feel like a little edit like that would have made it a bit more surprising when Deku got killed. Because then it also throws you off thinking, did Deku just defeat Astor? But honestly, overall, pretty good episode. I actually do think it deserves to be in the top 10. I don't think people are being harsh on it due to the controversy surrounding it. Overall though, it was a good episode. Then, if this is one of your requested episodes, I'm happy you got it. Thor versus Vegeta. So let's just immediately get this out of the way. Yeah, Princess of Pride is without doubt one of the best soundtracks this season. The analysis did the characters pretty good justice. It was kind of good that they went into more of Vegeta's story in the manga, because I haven't actually read a lot of Dragon Ball manga since Super began. I started reading the manga and then I just stopped. Not because I thought they were bad, but I just didn't really have time to read a lot of anime mangas at the time. Over time, I just never found the time to read hundreds of those in my free time. So I mostly just stick to like the animes and stuff. I will say, when it comes to 4 matchups, I do think this is a matchup that probably should have been like the main one for 4. Upon saying that though, it was pretty lame to see 4 for the 3rd time, and I get that Vegeta needed a better matchup because he hasn't had a matchup since Season 1, so he was a character I believe needed an update. But at the same time, I wasn't really too excited for 4 being his most wanted opponent. I mean, I suppose it's better than being Zod, which is just basically Goku vs Superman, but just with their rivals. Which in all honesty, it would honestly end the exact same way as Goku vs Superman. Fight me. In saying that though, the analysis was really entertaining, it really gave both these characters a lot of respect. 4's not really my favourite character, but the analysis made me seem a bit cooler. I will say, the analysis for 4 really did make me appreciate his character a bit more. Especially since Love and Thunder came out, we definitely needed an episode that made his character a bit cooler. The line delivery of Lenny, and I can't remember the actor who played as 4, but he was really good. I felt like a lot of lines were just straight out of the comics and anime. Dev with Vegeta getting his head crushed by Mjolnir, like, fucking hell, that was brutal. You even see the eye that's about to burst out, and then eventually he just pops out as soon as his head gets crushed. And yeah, overall, the fight was just phenomenal to watch. One of the funniest comments I ever saw under this video was that the only thing that was unrealistic about it was the fact the Earth was still standing, which, yeah, given how powerful these two are, I do feel like the Earth should have just been wiped out. Overall though, still a good episode, I really enjoyed it. Gogeta vs Vegeta. While it is good to finally solve debates between 2 crossovers, at the same time there are debates within some of the certain franchises that you do kinda have. Who would win between Batman and Superman? Who would win between Captain America and Iron Man? Obviously these aren't really fights that I'm personally into, but the fandom do have that sort of like want to find out who would win between those two. And for me and Dragon Ball community, there's always been that debate, who's the better fusion, Vegeta or Gogeta? As a kid I always found Vegeta to be much more interesting in design, I always found that fusion to be more interesting than Gogeta. And I remember in secondary school, my god, so many of my friends always said Gogeta was better than Vegeta. Boy was I happy when this episode came out those many years later. Because yeah, it finally solved the debate. Well, solved the debate in the death battle where, you know, every fight could end differently depending on who writes it, etc. But for a death battle, I was happy Vegeta won. And overall, the fight was really good. I also kind of like the fact they kind of made fun of the fact they do have similar origins in the analysis. I also love the fact Wiz and Boomstick, the only reason this fight happened is because they gathered the Dragon Balls to make a wish, which Wiz wanted world domination, that's very questionable, but Boomstick just wanted to see a really cool fight between these two characters. And the fight itself was really good. People were kind of questioning, was this really finale worthy? And I actually think it's finale worthy. I feel like this fight could work as both a premiere and a finale. And let me tell you, poof, the amount of things that happened in this fight were amazing. The soundtrack was really good, Lanny returning for Vegeta, can't remember the actor for Goku, though I will be kind of honest, Lanny kind of stole the spotlight. It really felt like his Vegeta was coming out more than the Goku side. I like the fact they did the gag Kamehameha.
Gotcha!
I like seeing all these powers clash. I even like the fact when they headbutted one another, they went Super Saiyan. And of course, the fight ending with Super Saiyan Blue clashing, them using their signature moves. And my god, even though the death wasn't brutal, it was cinematic. Gogeta coming in with the Dragon Fist and Vegeta using the Kamehameha. And it's a brief moment, you'll miss it. Vegeta goes Kaioken on the bit before Gogeta was about to strike with the Dragon Fist. It's a nice detail and it was brilliant. And I like the fact you didn't know who won until it showed the dead person. Because when blood dropped to the floor and you saw Vegeta nearly collapsing, kind of gave the idea he was impaled from the Dragon Fist. Only to show Gogeta just about missed and all that was remaining was the ashes. And it ends with Vegeta showing a good respect to his counterpart. Pour one out for our boy. Overall though, for a finale, it was pretty good. Not as good as Popeye vs Saitama, but it was good. It definitely is a really good episode, and I've rewatched it quite a few times. Harley Quinn versus Jinx. After watching Arcane the other year, I was really hyped when Jinx was announced for Death Battle, and obviously probably the most highly requested fight for her is Harley Quinn. And of course, Harley Quinn being one of the antagonists of the Batman animated series, and also having that really great TV show, I was obviously hyped to see what they did with this character, and even Jinx. And yes, analysis-wise, it was entertaining. It really did kind of do a good job showing how both crazy these two are, and also having a bit of fun with it. Never quite understood why in the analysis they tried to keep it a secret that Vi and Jinx are related. It's kind of common knowledge. It's not really a secret. I never got the joke of that. The fight itself was hilarious. Jinx and Harley Quinn, they're not your typical like heroes and anti-heroes. They're just completely insane, whether they're good guys or bad guys, and they really emphasize that in the fight. Jinx using her rocket launcher as like a puppet, and Harley Quinn like befriending it only for it to try and kill her, and Harley calls it a traitor and it looks sad. To Jinx getting a dynamite shoved in her mouth and she just holds onto it, waiting for it to blow up just so she can give it to Harley Quinn again. Only for that same dynamite to blow up in Harley Quinn's face, and she just goes, "Oh, nuts." And just Jinx blown into the sky, and then she just falls down while in the most casual pose ever. That is hilarious. The death itself? Pretty good. Minigun to the gut, and then rocket launcher sending Harley Quinn into space, only to blow her up. I gotta say, that was pretty brutal. And that's what I wanted. You know, these two needed a comedic fight. And I do like they mixed a bit of dark themes, like with Jinx having flashbacks to her sister and Harley Quinn tormenting Jinx through a psychotic side. If you're a Jinx and Harley Quinn fan like me, you got a good laugh out of this, and no doubt you've enjoyed the fight like me. Trunks versus Silver. So when this fight was announced, you were one of two fans. Well, one of fans and one fan. Whenever I heard this fight talked about, it was your only mate expressing how much he didn't really like the theme of this episode, where it was just basically Vegeta versus Shadow, but, you know, with other counterparts. And I do kind of agree with that. But on the other hand, we've had that type of episode done before. Albeit, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just because of the fact I just wanted to see Silver die, because I wasn't a huge fan of him. That again, at the same time, I'm not really a huge Trunks fan. Surprised that no plushie tried to go flying in my face. Not that Trunks isn't a bad character, he just never really connected with me. I never really saw the badassery that other people saw. I mean, sure, he killed Frieza, that was pretty cool. Honestly, that's all I really can remember when I watched Dragon Ball. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I can see why people like Trunks. It's just not a character I can really connect with. But when this fight was announced, I remember Yorime not being excited about it. I remember watching his reaction when he was about to get really disappointed. And unfortunately, this was an episode that was leaked to us. So we knew pre-hand that this fight was coming out. What we didn't know was this was going to be between Xenoverse Trunks and Archie Silver, which did make it a bit more interesting because it made it a bit more even, and yeah, the community itself didn't really know who to go for. So it was pretty interesting to see how are they going to do this. Will this finally be the episode that gives Archie Sonic its win? And the answer is yes. And even though the death wasn't completely bloody, I have to admit Trunks' death was pretty savage. Before we get to that though, the analysis was pretty funny. I like the fact it didn't just dig on Silver as much. I did like the fact they did give him a bit of respect. It was also crazy just to learn how stupid OP the Xenoverse Dragon Ball side is. Yeah, I've played Xenoverse 1 and 2. I never realised those stories continued on through like arcades, trading card games, and I just never knew how crazy powerful Trunks got in that story. As for the fight itself, one, it spawned probably one of the funniest memes the Death Battle community has ever come up with. And two, it was just really entertaining. The comedy was great, and they got Trunks' Team 4-star actor to reprise his role again, which was brilliant. The voice for Silver sounds familiar, but I can't pin my finger on it. It was good though. He almost perfectly replicated Silver, almost like they got the actual actor. It was just like entertaining to watch. I liked the effects that were used in it, with Trunks trying to fire a key beam at Silver, only for then Silver to use his like telekinesis to send it back to him. Not only that, come to Earth, redirect it to then hit him again. And I can't believe they made the most annoying meme out of Sonic, "It's no use," sound badass.
I told you, it's no use.
Let me remind you that so many sprite fights came out before this one with Trunks vs Silver, and they just annoyingly used "it's no use," never cleverly using it. The fact that this fight managed to make it both comedic and also badass at the same time. You get the fuck back on screen, you. The fact they made it so badass and comedic in one fight? That's commendable. Like, I was generally surprised at how good this episode was. And I'm not the only one, the fandom was even more impressed with how good this episode was. This was a highly requested fight, and it delivered on that hype. And let's be real here, the memes are just brilliant. Boba Fett versus the Predator. That's enough of that. So yeah, memes aside, what did I think about this episode? Well, I love Boba Fett, I love the Predator, so yeah, Team of Fight is pretty awesome. Albeit, I'm a little bit annoyed we didn't get Boba Fett versus Star-Lord, and the Predator versus the Arbiter. In saying that, though, it's not a bad matchup. I mean, years ago I did an animation of Boba Fett versus the Predator. And I will admit, Death Battle, I don't want to say you stole my opening for that fight, but
Scanning enemy units. There they are. You don't scare me. Fools. You're mine.
All I'm saying is, I want royalties. So, of course, the analysis for these two went into great details on just how much these two franchises, Star Wars and the Predator movies, are just so iconic. And I just love how badass like they showed how these characters are. Boba Fett, obviously they're taking stuff from the canon movies as well as the novels, and I like the fact they kind of blend them both into one, showing their cool aspects of each interpretation of him. But I also like the fact they used every single Predator, but mainly like the most experienced Predators to go up against Boba Fett. Really showing like how badass Boba Fett is, that he needs like the best Predator to go up against him. The fight as well was brilliant. I mean, Boba Fett getting his arm cut off with a disco blade. Did I say disco blade? Boba Fett's arm being chopped off by a smart disc, and then using a lightsaber he's claimed from one of the Jedi to cauterize his wound. My lord, Book of Boba Fett wishes it was that hardcore. Boba Fett even calling the Predator an ugly motherfucker? I didn't know I needed to hear that until now. The sound effect used for their fight was pretty great. When they're clashing with their staff weapons was pretty cool. The bit where the Predator goes to stab Boba Fett through the tree, only to then be surprised when he's not there, and Boba Fett just drops a grenade on him. Them fighting in a ring of fire with Boba Fett utilising his like tactics and fighting. And people were annoyed that Boba Fett didn't take an honourable approach in this fight, but Boba Fett's not honourable in his fights. There's two types of honourable warriors. There are ones that refuse to kill those that are weaker than them, and there are those who don't see themselves killing someone in a sneaky way. Boba Fett still fought him face to face, however he utilised his tactics of getting around his opponents in clever ways rather than trying to fight him to the death, which is how a Mandalorian fights. Predators, yeah, they wouldn't naturally use a cheap tactic to win a fight, it's not in their species honor code. But of course, that's also kind of their downfall when it comes to fighting someone like Boba Fett. If this was a fight between someone like the Arbiter, be a different story, because they both fight honourably, they refuse to use cheap tactics to win. To them, that's disgraceful to their warrior side. The death, though, did knock it down, though. Not the fact that death is bad, it just wasn't animated properly. For one, the Predator is going to use his typical tactic. He's about to lose a fight, so to save him some dignity, he was going to blow himself up with his opponent. Then Boba Fett stands on top of him, and they both get caught in the explosion, and Boba Fett has no scratches on him at all, well, minus the chopped off arm. Don't get me wrong, Beskar's really good at defending you against explosions, but I do feel like they should have had it where Boba Fett's fleeing and then it made you think, did he survive it? Did he escape on time? But no, he just takes a blast to the face, and they even say in the analysis he wouldn't survive a direct impact of that explosion. Yet in the fight, they show him surviving the direct explosion. I know, it's a nitpick, but I did kind of feel like I wish they made the death a bit better. But on the other hand though, they had the Predator go out on his own terms, not through Boba Fett. Too bad he's not going to get the bounty for this creature. SpongeBob versus Super Friends Aquaman. I can't believe I am saying that for a death battle. The fact that there's a death battle sign next to SpongeBob, that is... We live in strange times. So, if you're familiar with my channel, I love SpongeBob. Like, he's one of the most iconic cartoon characters of all time, and the time I was growing up, he was everywhere. People, kids, adults, teenagers, we all loved SpongeBob. He was funny, the humour in it was brilliant. I feel like SpongeBob was one of those timeless characters. There were a few SpongeBob death battles that I'm not really that interested in. Squidward versus Bakugo, like, I don't really get the theme of that, and it's pretty clear they're just doing it for a meme. Patrick versus Ed from Ed, Edd n Eddy, that's a matchup I can get behind, but overall, I'm not that hyped to see the entire SpongeBob roster get into death battle. If I had to say only two characters, SpongeBob and Patrick, maybe Mermaid Man, that would have been funny. And when this fight was announced, when SpongeBob's face appeared on the next time, I lost my mind. I just couldn't believe SpongeBob was coming to death battle, and against Super Friends Aquaman. Now, I will admit, I have some criticisms. I know. Your hatred gives me bliss. Okay, let's get the thing out of the way. So yeah, it's funny he's going up against Super Friends Aquaman. But on the other hand, in the fight they did kind of make fun of the fact that Aquaman from Super Friends is weak. Which is something I've always kind of been against death battle doing, like making fun of a character that much. The other thing is though, in the fight episode they said if he went up against, like, if SpongeBob went up against like the canonical comic book version of Aquaman, the fight wouldn't be different. So it just made me think, why didn't you not just do Aquaman versus SpongeBob? You know, I get it, the Super Friends is kind of made fun of for memes and stuff like that. Aquaman's kind of the butt of jokes even for DC fans. But it really did just feel like a middle finger to Super Friends Aquaman. But I do think in the fight himself, he had a few moments of shining.
Of them, I'm the lamest fucking one! I'm a ripoff. A joke.
Minus that one moment. Let's actually talk about the fight itself. First off, yes, if you love Super Friends and you love SpongeBob, this fight is perfect. It blends both the humour of both shows, and my god, SpongeBob just being electrocuted and disintegrated, only to reveal multiple SpongeBobs. The close-up shots, with Aquaman screaming Great Neptune with human mouths over his model, the little jump punch he does at the start of the fight, that's reminiscent of like Rayman in that one episode of SpongeBob. And just overall, the humour was just very much like a cartoon, which you kind of want for cartoon-like characters. It's kind of why like something like Saitama vs Popeye was so entertaining, because it really did feel like an anime met a Western cartoon, and that's what made it entertaining. So yeah, if you grew up with these two, then yeah, you're gonna love this fight just for the style of the fight alone. The end of the fight with the music kicking up, going very SpongeBob theme as he's flying across the universe. Aquaman preparing to launch all the Earth's water at him. And just the fight ending with the fact SpongeBob is perhaps one of the most powerful characters that Death Battle have looked at. But could he beat Goku? Yes, he fucking could. There's no debate about that. But yeah, overall, yeah, this fight was phenomenal, and I can't think of any more of an episode that's deserving a third place. But what are my top 2 episodes of this season? Which of the last 2 episodes are on this ranking? Well, let's get around to reviewing my number 1 and number 2. Sauron for the Lich King for number 2, and Omni-Man vs Homelander for number 1. These fights had so much love, so much passion put into them, it's hard to not see them in the top 5. In fact, I kind of find it questionable if anyone puts it even below the top 5 episodes this season. But yeah, Sauron vs the Lich King first. Originally it was going to be my number 1, but let's just say Omni-Man vs Homelander just had so much around it, it was hard to not put it in the top. Sauron vs the Lich King though. This is my introduction to the Lich King, but as for Sauron, I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings fanboy. I do love the Lord of the Rings movies, and Sauron's just one of the coolest villains in fiction. Like, he doesn't have that much screen time, but when he is on screen, he is memorable. Hell, even in the Rings of Power TV show, it was an abysmal TV show, but when Sauron was on screen, it was phenomenal. I just really love this fight. It's so cinematic. The analysis was really entertaining. It wasn't funny per se, except when Boomstick ate the One Ring. That was pretty funny. But just how they went over the Lich King's lore and stuff like that, it was crazy how much lore is in World of Warcraft. Like, bloody hell, like, Lich King I really thought was just a final boss that you fought. He wasn't meant to be anything that deep and complex. The cinematography of the fight, when they're fighting on the ice castle and then Sauron erupts a volcano and just fireballs are flying across the battlefield and everything like that. The weapons clashing, having this sound-breaking clash as they impacted one another. And just the line deliveries were so hardcore. I can't put into words how cool they are, so I'll just play them on screen. If that isn't enough to get it in the top 5, we have failed as a society. Because one thing I think Death Battle always tends to nail with bad guy Death Battles is just how cool they make them look. When heroes versus heroes, it's kind of a 50-50, they might make it good, they might make it a bit questionable, because they do have to make the heroes kill the other hero. But when it's bad guys fighting one another, it is so entertaining to see these egomaniacs go at it. And the thing Sauron versus the Lich King nailed was them one-upping one another, showing that intimidation about them and their dominance of the battlefield, showing that they were in control. There was never a moment where one was like, oh my god, you're so powerful, you're also powerful. It's like, no, these two are trying to one-up one another, and when the other did try and one-up the other one just replied with just insulting them because they still thought they were going to win the fight. Even when the Lich King died, when his sword got shattered and he screamed impossible, he sounded more infuriated that his sword got broken, which honestly is very in character of him. And I love when Sauron got impaled with the sword. He felt insulted when the Lich King said, "You served me now," and him just replying, "I serve no one." Just phenomenal. Like, this fight was great. Of course though, that now brings us to Omni-Man vs Homelander. And yeah, if you saw this episode coming out, you've only just watched Invincible and you've just watched The Boys. The Boys and Invincible are perhaps some of the best superhero media I've seen out there. The Boys is a good satire on like everyone obsessing over superhero merchandise these days, because yeah, as much as I love superhero stuff, I can't lie, people are kind of getting obsessed with it. Don't get me wrong, I love a good Batman film, I love a good Marvel film, but sometimes you just gotta learn when, like, to try something new and stuff like that. Or if you're gonna do a superhero themed story, add a twist to it. And The Boys and Invincible did it really well, with Invincible being a love letter to just comic book fans. Like, just watching the show, it's a darker story than your average superhero story, but the characters are so well designed and everything like that, you love watching it. It really did feel like watching, like, the Justice League animated series again, just more darker and more mature. And obviously a brilliant voice cast that made it entertaining. The hype around this episode though was through the roof. When this fight was announced, even Amazon replied to them on Twitter, and they were just saying, do they not know what happened with the Guardians Invincible? In fact, Homelander's just one of those villains that you just love to see get hurt. And let me tell you, people were hyped that it was going to be Omni-Man. Like, okay, yeah, people do say they would have liked to have seen Omni-Man versus Bardock, but I'll be honest, I was never a fan of that matchup, to be honest. But this fight, I can get behind it. And it was a hand-drawn fight. It had some brilliant voices. One, I really thought they got J.K. Simmons to reprise his role as Omni-Man, but sadly not, but the actor was so good for that. And of course, let's just talk about that death, because I'm just going to say, if you're a reaction channel and you are monetized, I can imagine this death left you demonetized on that video. It's so brutal, so over the top, yet it was so deserving to that character. But not only that, it captured the theme of both The Boys and Invincible. It is a brutal superhero series, so if they died in any way, like just snapped neck or anything like that, that's not really deserving of both these characters. The dialogue between them was also phenomenal. I love how Homelander was throwing a tantrum. However, I also do like the fact that even though it was a one-sided fight, they still made it seem even with a one-on-one confrontation. Homelander had some advantages, but yeah, overall they go around to say like, yeah, he wasn't really going to win this fight against Omni-Man of all people. And frankly, if you're a fan of both Invincible and The Boys, this fight is everything you want from it. It's phenomenal, it has great action, great animation, and a great soundtrack to back it up. And yeah, that was my opinion about my rankings for Season 9 of Death Battle. And yeah, I have already done this before on Lads, but I wanted to go into more details about matchups I didn't really give a lot of details on, but also kind of go into more details about a lot of the fights that I really liked. And let's be real here, my list actually had the fights where they deserve to be. Just saying. In case you people aren't aware, I'm joking. You only mate and Sean are allowed to have their own opinion, alright? So I guess all I have to say is, can't wait for Death Battle Season 10. Hopefully the episodes that were announced are really good. And I'm personally hoping that some of my matchups that I've put out there get on there. There's a few I've wanted to see done, but I feel like some of them might not. But in saying that though, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me talk about my ranking. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, stick around. We'll have more content like this for you in the future. Farewell, everybody.